We know our next guest, best from Loose Women as the TV presenter from the shows of Living Wild and the UK coverage of the Paralympics, and a disability advocate.
Recently, Sophie Morgan shared her incredible life story in her first book, Driving Forwards, and she joins us live now in the studio.
Hey,
hello.
Sophie.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The book, when did you start writing this book, and why did you decide to write Driving Forwards, Soph?
So I started writing it not long after the COVID lockdown the first time, so in March time. And it wasn't actually my plan, really. The plan was I was going to be going on a big adventure on a Channel 4 series. We were going to be doing a mad bike adventure that I was going to be going on, but that got cancelled because of COVID. So I was sat there going, what am I going to do? Anyway, I had at that point lived 18 years non-disabled and 18 years disabled. And I was at this sort of interesting point in my life, and I thought, you know what, if I'm going to write anything, I'm going to write it now because I've got the time, and also I'm going to write about what happened to almost kind of close off the chapter in a sense, so I could start this next chapter afresh. So I looked back. It took me a couple of years, to be honest. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I decided to look back at what happened the moments before I was paralysed, what happened when I was paralysed, the kind of the immediacy, the first 3 months of rehabilitation, and that window of time and what happened then, and then the subsequent 18 years and what's happened to get me to where I am now.
Are you glad you spent that amount of time before you started writing? Because obviously your memories crystallise and not change, but people's, like, you know, I'm fascinated by memory and how over a period of time, you know, your version of what happened to you is kind of probably different to how you'd see it 6 months after.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, realistically, it's what, 18 years ago? Now,
Sure.
What's now 20 years ago this happened. So, of course, my memory's hazy. Layer into the fact that I was in trauma, that I was going through the most traumatic experience of my life and my young life. So there was a lot that, obviously, I didn't remember, but I thankfully had kept diaries the whole time I was in hospital. And I dug out those diaries and I went back into them and just absorbed all the feelings, all of the thoughts, all of the time that I was, you know, what I was going through, put it all in the book. Well,
I had the good fortune a few years ago to interview a few Battle of Britain pilots, and when I got to know one who sadly passed now, a guy called Tom Neal, and when I got to know him quite well towards the end of the summer, I said, when you tell me a story, are you remembering it fresh, or are you remembering a memory? And he said, it's a really good question. He said, quite often, he said, when the news crew comes up and they say, what is it like doing this or doing that, then I kind of just tell them a story. I've trusted that. He said, but every now and again I remember a lightning in the bottle moment. Yeah. And obviously, you know, in a weird way, that's his own trauma. Yeah. So, and he's bottled a lot of that. But I'll remember a lightning in the bottle, and suddenly I'll go, oh no, I do remember when that happened. Was it similar for you?
100%. And as I went through it, so I tried to take the reader on a journey of person I was before, what I was up to as a young girl, that kind of, I was on the precipice of adulthood, I was 18 years old, and all of the feelings that you have at that time of excitement about what's going to happen next for your life. Yeah. You might not know, but you certainly feel that anything's possible. And I was at that age where I was sort of, I suppose, quite headstrong. I'd say I probably thought I knew it all. You know, I was that kind of girl. Anyway, when I went back when I went to write it, I decided I was going to take you from as close as I could into that moment, and then take you through the steps, step by step, of the going through the injury, going through the car crash, going through the rehabilitation, the moment somebody told me I wasn't going to walk again, the moment I then stepped out of hospital and went out into the world as a wheelchair user, and, you know, all of those kind of, the process. And as I wrote it, things came back, and certainly memories that I had lodged way back in there came out.
Fascinating.
Because the thing is, the book's called Driving Forwards, which is it explains the kind of person I have been, which is constantly going forwards, going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Don't look back, there's no point, you're not going that way, you're going that way. So I never really looked back. I would try not to. So the book encouraged me to go, right, let's look back at what happened, but also, what have you learned? What have you gained? Yeah. And I think that's what I wanted to unpack, that there's a lot of assumptions that come with people who have, you know, lived with a disability. And what I wanted to try and do is to speak to those assumptions, and in some case, unpack the ways in which you might assume what might happen next might not be what you expect. Yeah. And that actually there were some really positive benefits and amazing outcomes that came from this trauma that have led me to live this wonderful life. Yeah. So it's not the triumph over tragedy trope, But it's certainly, there's something in my book that I really wanted to pull out, which is don't assume that when you become paralysed or you have a disability that your life ends.
Yeah.
It might just go in a different direction.
Yeah.
How was your approach to life before I know you like to call it a crash, before the crash, and how do you approach life now? Because obviously, looking at you, there is no stopping you. I mean...
Well, this is the thing. There's a lot stopping me, unfortunately, because I live as a wheelchair user, and it is challenging, and there are things that I wish would be easier. And I can talk about that, some stuff I'm working on at the moment to try and make things easier. But I'd say the person I was is very much the person I still am, which is kind of a little bit determined, a little bit difficult, a little bit challenging, won't take no for an answer sort of thing. But I definitely brought some of those traits with me. I definitely lost a lot. I definitely gained a lot. You know, that's the process of growing up anyway. I was 18 when it happened, so I didn't really know who I was. But to your point about the language I use around the crash, I did take a very deliberate position, maybe about a decade ago, to stop using language around my crash and calling it an accident and instead calling it a crash. Because I decided it's really important to take responsibility for the things that I've done in my life and take responsibility as I do for everything that I do with my life, right? So I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. My crash happened because of certain things that a lot of young people find themselves, you know, it was almost like a textbook crash. If you look at it in some respects, I hadn't had my licence for long. And if you look at the statistics around young drivers, a lot of them crash within the first 6 or 7 months.
Do you know
so there's all those kind of dangers that we're in. And I really wanted someone to go, oh, wow, there was things that Sophie did that perhaps I could avoid, you know, mistakes she made that I could avoid, and I really wanted to do that deliberately. So calling it an accident almost removes that responsibility and makes it look like, it was out of your hands. It wasn't. The steering wheel's in my hands. It was my mistakes that I made that led to this situation.
That's the thing that resonates so much for me, is you completely owned your decisions, and B, There's just a lack of self-pity. And actually, that's the one thing in the world that you'd be forgiven for feeling a bit of self-pity. But is that been a journey, or did you just have that mindset?
I don't know, you know. I think the self-pity thing might come around a little bit because I get so affronted or so offended when I'm met with pity. Yeah. Because it's something that does haunt people with visible disabilities, certainly, that, you know, they sort of, disability is not... It's assumed when you say you're disabled, oh, I'm so sorry, that's awful. And there's that kind of implicit pity everywhere you go. And whilst it is a challenge, and as I said earlier, it's not easy being a wheelchair user, I don't like getting met constantly with that assumption that it's something to be pitied, because there's actually, as I said, there's a lot that I've gained from it. So I think the self-pitying comes around because I don't want to pity myself, because I don't want other people to pity me. But at the same time, I don't see my situation as being this tragedy. I've been so lucky. I've got such privilege around me, my friends and my family, and now my job, which I love, and I'm so privileged in that respect.
Sophie, we've run out of time. I feel terrible because we could talk to you for ages.
You're an amazing woman, and thank you for everything you do, and what an advocate you are. And congratulations on Living Wild Series 2, Channel 4. Brilliant. So congratulations on that, and Driving Forwards. You're just constantly at it.
Driving Forwards, Journey of Resilience is out now. Living Wild continues on Saturday, 8 o'clock on Channel 4. All episodes available to stream now on All 4 as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.